Imagine a bridge so ambitious it was deemed a mathematical impossibility by the world's leading structural authorities. Picture Jean-Pierre Beaumont, a legendary French architect decorated with every award in the industry, standing on the banks of the frozen Volga River, declaring to a global news crew that the Russian-engineered Project Titan would collapse under its own weight within minutes of the support cables being tensioned. He called it a monument to Slavic ego and predicted a catastrophe that would resonate for decades. But as the clock struck noon and the final bolts were tightened, the world witnessed something that defied every law of Western physics Beaumont held dear. This is the incredible, heart-pounding story of the bridge that shouldn't exist and the humble Siberian engineer whose primitive methods shattered the reputation of a global icon. Before we begin this journey into the heart of engineering defiance, I want to see how far this story is reaching. Drop a comment below and tell us exactly where you are watching from. The controversy began at the Global Infrastructure Summit in Geneva, where the blueprints for the Great Siberian Span, nicknamed Project Titan, were first unveiled to a room full of skeptical experts. Jean-Pierre Beaumont, the man who had designed glass skyscrapers in Dubai and suspension bridges in the Alps, didn't just disagree with the designs. He ridiculed them with a fervor that bordered on the personal. He pointed to the radical asymmetrical countertension system proposed by a little-known Russian engineer named Viktor Sokolov, claiming that the lack of traditional deep-water pylons made the structure inherently unstable. Beaumont's critique was swift and brutal, broadcast to millions. This is not engineering. It is a suicide pact made of steel and hope. If they attempt to join the central arches without secondary supports, the entire span will fold into the river like a house of cards. His words sparked an international media frenzy, pitting Western refined architectural theory against what he called crude, outdated Soviet-era brute force. Viktor Sokolov, a man who spent more time in grease-stained coveralls than in tailored suits, didn't respond with a press release or a heated debate on a news panel. Instead, he sent Beaumont a single hand-drawn postcard from the construction site in the Russian wilderness with 4 words written in thick ink. Come see for yourself. Insulted yet intrigued by the opportunity to be proven right on a global stage, Beaumont accepted the invitation, arriving at the construction site with a fleet of cameras and a team of structural analysts. The atmosphere was electric, a mix of freezing Siberian wind and the palpable tension of a multi-billion-dollar gamble. The bridge was a massive, sweeping curve of reinforced steel that looked almost too thin for its immense length, stretching across a gorge where the wind speeds were known to snap high-tension power lines. To Beaumont, it looked like a disaster waiting for a catalyst, and he spent his first hour on site loudly pointing out stress fractures that Sokolov insisted were merely surface expansion joints. As the day of the great joining arrived, the internet was hooked on the live feed, with millions tuning in to see if Beaumont's dire predictions would come true. The French architect stood on a high observation deck, his digital sensors and stress calculation software ready to capture the exact moment of failure. He explained to the viewers that the thermal contraction from the -30-degree weather would cause the steel to become brittle, and once the temporary hydraulic jacks were removed, the central weight would overwhelm the cantilevered arms. He was so confident that he even bet his prestigious Legion d'honneur medal on the bridge's failure. Meanwhile, Sokolov was down on the main deck, sharing a thermos of hot tea with his welding crew, seemingly unbothered by the fact that the entire world's eyes were on his work. He knew something Beaumont didn't. He hadn't built the bridge to resist the environment. He had built it to move with it, using a forgotten principle of elastic tension found in ancient wooden church designs from the Russian north. The moment of truth came at precisely 12:15 p.m., when the order was given to release the secondary support cables. A hush fell over the crowd and the millions watching the live stream. Beaumont's monitors began to glow with red warnings, showing massive shifts in the weight distribution. "There it is," he shouted, pointing to a slight dip in the central span. "The structural integrity is failing. The torque is too high." For 30 agonizing seconds, the bridge groaned, a sound like a giant beast waking from a slumber, echoing through the canyon. Metal ground against metal, and the cameras caught a shower of sparks as the friction plates adjusted. Beaumont was practically vibrating with a mix of professional vindication and morbid excitement, waiting for the catastrophic snap. But then the groaning stopped. The dip, that Beaumont called a failure, suddenly stabilized, and the bridge didn't collapse. It settled into a perfect, rigid arc that looked even stronger than before. Confused, Beaumont checked his sensors, certain they were malfunctioning. He began to scream that the sensors were lying, that the bridge was in a state of unstable equilibrium, and would fall the moment any lateral load was applied. Sokolov, hearing this through the comms, simply smiled and signaled to a line of heavy-duty Kamaz trucks parked on the riverbank. One by one, 40 massive vehicles, each loaded with tons of lead ballast, began to drive onto the bridge simultaneously. The internet watched in awe as the primitive structure took the weight of a small army without so much as a tremor. This was the moment that broke the internet. The sight of the world's most famous architect frantically checking his tablet while a line of dusty trucks proved him wrong in real time. The sheer audacity of the stress test was something no Western insurance company would ever allow, but Sokolov was playing by different rules and he was winning. As the trucks reached the center of the span, Sokolov did the unthinkable. He ordered them to stop and begin a rhythmic bounce by engaging and disengaging their heavy suspensions. This was designed to test the harmonic resonance of the bridge, the very thing that had destroyed the Tacoma Narrows Bridge decades prior. Beaumont went pale, backing away from the railing, convinced that the resonance would tear the steel apart. Instead, the bridge seemed to breathe. The asymmetrical cables that Beaumont had mocked began to hum, distributing the vibration throughout the entire length of the structure rather than letting it build in one spot. It was a symphony of engineering. The French architect realized in that moment that he wasn't looking at a failed design. He was looking at a revolutionary leap in structural physics that his software wasn't even programmed to understand. The live stream chat was moving so fast it was a blur of flags and emojis, with RIP Beaumont and Sokolov Power trending globally. The humiliation was total when Sokolov walked up to the observation deck and handed Beaumont a simple physical model of the bridge made of nothing but pine wood and string. He explained that the secret wasn't in the strength of the steel, but in the tension of the void. He had used the extreme Siberian cold to shrink the primary joints during assembly so that as they warmed slightly from the friction of use, they would lock into a living grip. Beaumont, the man who relied on supercomputers, had been defeated by a man who understood the temperament of the earth and the climate. The French architect collapsed into a chair, his face a mask of shock as he finally admitted on camera, "I have spent 40 years building against nature. He built with it. I am a student again." The story didn't end with the bridge standing. It turned into a viral documentary about the danger of intellectual ego. Clips of Beaumont's arrogant predictions spliced with the bridge's success garnered hundreds of millions of views. The bridge that wouldn't fall became a symbol of national pride, but more importantly, it became a lesson for engineers everywhere. Sokolov's elastic tension theory was suddenly the most researched topic in architecture, and the very firms that had laughed at his blueprints were now offering him blank checks to consult on their projects. The internet dubbed the event the Siberian Miracle, and memes of Sokolov drinking tea while the bridge groaned became the ultimate symbol of staying calm under pressure. It was a classic David and Goliath story, but instead of a stone, the giant was brought down by a perfectly calculated arc of steel. In the weeks following the event, Beaumont's reputation underwent a fascinating transformation. Instead of retreating into obscurity, he did something that regained him the public's respect. He published a 500-page retraction and analysis of why he was wrong, titled, "The Arrogance of the Straight Line." He credited Sokolov with saving his career by showing him the blind spots created by modern Western education. The two men, once bitter rivals, were photographed months later in a small Russian village, sharing a meal and working on a new design for a floating bridge in the Amazon. This redemption arc kept the story alive, proving that the only thing the internet loves more than a spectacular fail is a humble comeback. The bridge itself became a pilgrimage site for engineering students, a physical reminder that math is a language, and sometimes there are local dialects that are more powerful than the standard tongue. The environmental impact of the bridge was also a key factor in its viral success. Because it didn't require massive concrete pylons in the riverbed, it had almost zero impact on the local fish migrations, something Beaumont had claimed was impossible for a span of that size. The Project Titan became the gold standard for eco-friendly infrastructure, showing that heavy industry didn't have to mean destructive industry. The internet's green communities rallied behind Sokolov, calling him the eco-engineer of the century. This added a layer of depth to the story that moved beyond just bridge building and into the realm of global sustainability, making the French architect's failure a turning point for how we think about the relationship between technology and the planet. From a technical standpoint, the Project Titan bridge utilized a specialized alloy that Sokolov had spent a decade developing in a laboratory in Omsk. This alloy had a memory function, allowing it to return to its original shape even after extreme deformation from wind or weight. Beaumont had analyzed the steel as standard grade, failing to account for the molecular innovations that allowed for such a slender profile. This was the smoking gun of his failure. He had judged a book by its cover, assuming that because the construction site looked rough, the materials must be low quality. The viral science side of YouTube went into overdrive, with creators making 3D animations of the molecular structure of the bridge, further boosting the story's reach into educational circles. The social media fallout also saw a massive surge in Siberian core aesthetics, a fascination with the rugged, ingenious, and often hidden brilliance of regional engineering. People began sharing stories of village geniuses who solved complex problems with simple tools, creating a global appreciation for vernacular engineering. Sokolov became an accidental influencer, though he famously stayed off social media, which only added to his mystic aura. His refusal to engage in the hype made him even more of a hero to the internet, which was tired of loud personalities. He remained the quiet heart of the story, the man who let his bridge do the talking while the world's loudest experts were forced to listen to the silence of a structure that refused to fall. Years later, Project Titan remains a marvel, having survived earthquakes and record-breaking blizzards that would have leveled traditional suspension bridges. It stands as a testament to the moment when a French legend was proven wrong in minutes by a man who understood that true strength isn't about being rigid, it's about knowing how to bend without breaking. The bridge is now equipped with a permanent Beaumont-Sokolov Research Center at its base, where the next generation of architects learns how to merge Western precision with Eastern intuition. The internet still occasionally re-breaks every time a new video of the bridge during a storm goes viral, showing the massive span swaying gracefully like a willow tree in the wind, a sight that still terrifies and amazes viewers in equal measure. The legacy of this event also changed the International Building Code forever. Rules that were once considered set in stone were rewritten to allow for the dynamic equilibrium method Sokolov pioneered. This meant that bridges could be built in places previously thought unbuildable, connecting remote communities and changing lives across the globe. The failure of Jean-Pierre Beaumont wasn't just his own. It was the failure of a rigid system of thinking that prioritized the way things have always been done over the way things could be. By being proven wrong so spectacularly, Beaumont allowed the entire world to move forward, proving that sometimes the best thing that can happen to an expert is to be completely and utterly defeated by a better idea. In the end, the story of the bridge that would fail is a story about the bridge between two cultures, two philosophies, and two men. It's a reminder that no matter how many degrees you have or how many awards you've won, the physical world doesn't care about your reputation. It only cares about the truth of the materials and the honesty of the design. Jean-Pierre Beaumont and Viktor Sokolov are now named synonymous with the golden age of collaborative engineering, but for the millions who watched that live stream, they will always be the arrogant architect and the brilliant babushka of bridges. As we look at the stunning visuals of the Titan span one last time, we have to ask, what other impossibilities are just waiting for someone with enough courage to prove the experts wrong? If you found this story as inspiring as we did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most incredible engineering marvels.